The markets open, traders shuffle, numbers flicker, screens glow with the heartbeat of nations. In one corner of the world, a single currency moves with the force of a tidal wave, backed by banks, history, and power. In another, 54 currencies jostle, clash, and stumble, each one fighting for air in a global economy that barely notices their struggle. Some currencies are fragile, some are barely holding value for a day. Some are tied to old colonial masters, their worth decided in offices far from home. And most of them are just illusions, a game of numbers printed on paper, waiting for the next crisis to set them aflame. Africa, a continent with the wealth of kings beneath its soil, yet a currency system that keeps it bound in chains. A place where trade should flow like the Nile, but instead moves in a trickle, drowned by exchange rates, debt, and the invisible weight of history. One currency, that's the dream. A single note, a unified force, a financial declaration of independence. No more fractured economies, no more foreign dependencies, no more African nations having to measure their worth in someone else's coin. But money isn't just money, it's power, it is control. And when you try to take that power from the hands that have always held it, they don't just let go. So, why doesn't Africa have one currency? And more importantly, if it did, would it truly set the continent free? It sounds like a simple question. Europe did it. The Americas kind of did it with the US dollar running the show. Even regions in Africa have tried, with things like the West African CFA franc. But every time someone brings up the idea of a single African currency, the conversation either turns into a heated debate, a pool of conspiracy theories, or an awkward silence. On paper, it makes sense. One currency means easier trade, no exchange rate headaches, and a stronger, united Africa standing up to global economic giants. But in reality, it is an economic puzzle so complex that even the most ambitious policymakers get migraines thinking about it. So let's break it down. Why doesn't Africa already have one currency? What would it take to make it happen? And most importantly, if Africa did pull it off, would it actually be a good thing? First, history. The idea of a single African currency is not new. The African Union has been talking about it for decades. The goal? To create something like the euro, one money for all. In fact, there were plans for an African central bank and a unified currency called the Afro by 2028. But if we're being honest, that deadline is about as realistic as a unicorn running for president because the challenges are enormous. Let's start with the elephant in the room: economic disparity. Africa is 54 countries, all with different economies, different levels of development, and wildly different financial systems. Some, like Nigeria, Egypt, and South Africa, have big economies with big industries. Others depend almost entirely on agriculture or exports of a single resource, like oil or gold. How do you make one currency work when some countries are economic giants and others are just trying to keep the lights on? Then there's inflation. Imagine one country has a strong, stable economy while another is printing money like it's a Black Friday sale. If they share the same currency, the reckless decisions of one country could drag the entire continent down. This is exactly why the European Union set strict rules for the euro, rules that, to be honest, not every country even follows properly. And speaking of rules, who's in charge? A single currency needs a central bank. But if you think 54 countries will agree on one group of people to control the entire continent's money supply, well, good luck with that. If Nigeria, for example, contributes the most to this bank, should it have the most control? Or should every country have an equal say, even if some barely use banking systems? What if a country is in crisis and needs to print money to get out of it? Do the others agree when they know that this will affect everybody and they are, in essence, footing the bill to get the country out of a trouble that they didn't cause? Now, let's talk politics. The idea of African unity is beautiful, but real-world politics are messy. Some leaders won't want to give up control over their own currency because it's a tool of power. Others don't trust their neighbors enough to link economies with them. Tribes in the same country don't even trust each other. How would this play out on an international scale? And then there's the colonial factor. Many African currencies are still tied to foreign powers. The CFA franc, used by 14 countries, is literally backed by France. Breaking away from those systems is complicated, but let's say, hypothetically, that Africa did unite under one currency. What would happen? The good news: trade across African countries would explode. No more currency conversions, no more fluctuating exchange rates. Just one simple system. A single currency could strengthen Africa's global economic influence. Right now, African economies are often at the mercy of the US dollar, the euro, and the Chinese yuan. A unified currency could give Africa more bargaining power. If done right, it could attract more investment. Investors love stability, and nothing says stability like a continent that finally got its financial act together. The bad news: countries would lose control over their own monetary policies. Right now, if a country like Ghana has an economic crisis, its central bank can adjust interest rates or print more money to help. With a shared currency, it would have to wait for a decision from a central authority. Economic crashes would be harder to manage. If one country's economy tanks, the damage spreads. Just look at the Eurozone. When Greece's economy collapsed, it dragged other countries down with it. Some countries would benefit more than others. If a few big economies dominate, smaller nations would struggle to keep up, leading to resentment and more economic inequality. So what's the solution? If Africa isn't ready for one currency, what can it do? Well, first, it can strengthen regional currencies. Instead of one currency for all of Africa, smaller regional unions could merge their money first. West Africa has already been trying to replace the CFA franc with the eco. If regions successfully manage their own shared currencies, then maybe a continent-wide system can be realistic. Step 2, it can build strong, independent African financial institutions. This means breaking away from systems that still depend on former colonial powers and setting up African-controlled banking and trade networks. Then it's time to fix trade within Africa. A lot of African countries trade more with Europe, China, and the US than with each other. A single currency won't fix that. Better infrastructure, better policies, and fewer trade barriers will. And of course, there's the question of political stability. This is a tough one, but without stability, no financial system will work. If countries keep dealing with coups, corruption, and economic mismanagement, a shared currency would be a financial disaster waiting to happen. At the end of the day, Africa could have one currency someday, but it's not about printing money and slapping a lion on the bill. It's about fixing the systems first. Because let's be honest, if you can't trust your neighbor to return your borrowed charger, you probably shouldn't share a bank account with them.